Welcome. You've just stepped into Cold Blood Files, the place where chilling stories and the darkest truths in history are told from a completely different perspective. Before we begin, if you're someone who craves unsolved mysteries, controversial trials, or just questions no one dares to answer, then hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, so you never miss what's coming next. But tonight, this isn't just another case. You're about to witness an execution where the call to stop it came exactly 1 minute too late. You'll be pulled into a case with no eyewitnesses, no confession, no hard evidence, yet a man was still sent into the gas chamber. And for over 60 years, one terrifying question has lingered. What if Burton Abbott was innocent, and the real killer walked free? Worse, what if it was justice itself that pulled the trigger? Hold tight, and stay until the end. Because what you're about to hear might shake your very trust in the justice system we all believe in. Let's begin. Part 1, The Late Call, When Justice Arrives After Death. San Quentin, California. March 15, 1957. The sky was still dark, and the early morning cold seeped through the thick stone walls of the aging prison. Heavy footsteps echoed down the damp hallway, leading a young man toward the final door of his life, the gas chamber. His name was Burton Abbott. Only 29 years old. His eyes were wide open, his face disturbingly calm, as if he couldn't believe what was happening. Or maybe, he knew deep down that he didn't belong there. People said he walked without resistance. No screaming. No tears. Just silence, as cold and inevitable as the fate the court had handed him, death, for the kidnapping, rape, and murder of a 14-year-old girl named Stephanie Bryan. The heavy steel door closed behind him. The chamber was sealed. The procedure began. Technicians operated the machinery like clockwork, step by step, their movements mechanical, emotionless, as if this were just another routine. But just as the gas began to hiss through the chamber, thickening the air with a deadly presence, somewhere else in the prison, a phone rang. Urgent. Repetitive. Desperate. It was a direct call from the governor's office. On the other end, a voice pleaded to halt the execution. A last-minute appeal had been reviewed, and the governor was requesting an immediate delay, to allow time for further investigation. But it was already too late. By the time the call was received and transferred, the process had ended. Burton Abbott was already dead. Just 1 minute and 19 seconds earlier, he had still been alive. Now, his body lay limp, motionless under a cloud of toxic gas. And the most horrifying part: no one could say for sure if he was actually guilty. This story isn't fiction. It isn't the plot of some thriller novel or courtroom drama. It is real, recorded in court transcripts, archived in newspapers, whispered about in legal debates for decades. A case that, over 60 years later, still refuses to die. Because to this day, one terrifying question remains. Was Burton Abbott truly the killer? Or just another victim, executed by mistake in the name of justice? But what makes this story truly chilling isn't just the execution. It's the haunting coincidence. The call to save him came just 1 minute too late. 60 seconds. Too short to change the course of history. but long enough to end a man's life forever. And from that moment on, Burton Abbott's death became more than a legal event. It became a waking nightmare for the American justice system, a dark reminder that sometimes, the court's final judgment, might itself be the greatest crime of all. Part 2, The Girl Who Vanished in Broad Daylight, and the Clue Hiding Inside a Basement. April 28, 1955. It was a bright, ordinary day for most kids walking home from school in Oakland, California. But that afternoon, 14-year-old Stephanie Bryan, a bright, well-mannered girl who was never late, never made it home. She was last seen walking near the campus of the University of California, Berkeley. A lively street, full of people, in broad daylight. No dark alley. No known danger. Nothing to suggest that this would be the final stretch of Stephanie's life. As the clock hit 5 p.m. and there was still no sign of Stephanie, her family grew worried. By nightfall, fear turned into panic. A massive search effort was launched. Police scoured the area. Hundreds of volunteers took to the streets, knocking on doors, sweeping every alley. But there was nothing. Not a scream. Not a trace. It was as if the girl had vanished into thin air. A week passed. Then a month. Then almost 3. The case was going cold. But just as the community began to lose hope, something utterly unexpected happened. A man came forward. Georgia Abbott, Burton Abbott's mother, discovered a small purse, a few pieces of jewelry, and what appeared to be school papers hidden in her basement, the very house where she lived with her son Burton, his wife, and their young 3-year-old child. The items matched the descriptions of Stephanie Bryan's belongings. No one could explain how they got there. No one knew how long they'd been hidden. Georgia called the police. Investigators arrived and began a full search of the house. What they found sent chills through the room: numerous personal items belonging to Stephanie, her student ID, schoolbooks, glasses, even her handbag, all hidden in a dusty, cluttered corner of the basement behind old boxes no one had touched in years. Burton Abbott was now the prime suspect. But he denied everything. He claimed he had nothing to do with the girl's disappearance, that the house had been in the family for generations, and that perhaps someone had broken in. He cooperated. He agreed to testing. But before he could make a solid defense, another discovery shattered any hope of proving his innocence. Stephanie Bryan's body was found. Her remains were discovered in a remote wooded area in Redwood City, over 180 miles from the Abbott home. The body was badly decomposed. But a few scraps of clothing, dental evidence, and personal effects confirmed her identity. Though there was no clear sign of sexual assault or a murder weapon, the death was officially ruled a deliberate homicide. Burton Abbott was arrested. Charged. And though he continued to proclaim his innocence, the public, the media, and soon the courtroom all seemed to have already made up their minds. A young man. A basement full of evidence. A girl found dead. What more could anyone need? But what no one could answer was even more disturbing. Why did the evidence appear so perfectly, so conveniently, and in a way that almost seemed staged? Was Burton Abbott truly a cold-blooded killer? or just an unfortunate man caught in a deadly storm of grief, fear, and public outrage. But if you think the mystery ends here, think again. What happened in court next would force everyone to reconsider the entire case, revealing contradictions, missing details, and unsettling twists that made the truth even harder to find. In the courtroom, something strange began to happen, as if justice itself was being manipulated, slowly and silently. Part 3, a trial built on shadows, when justice no longer meant truth. When Burton Abbott was arrested, the public erupted. Headlines screamed his name. Television updates ran by the hour. The media had already written their version of the story. A teenage girl had died, and this man must be the monster who did it. But inside the courtroom, a place supposedly built for truth, something darker began to take hold. From the very first day, the trial felt less like a pursuit of justice and more like a public execution in slow motion. The benches were packed. Cameras flashed. All eyes locked onto the young man who, in their minds, was already guilty. The prosecution laid out the damning evidence. Stephanie Bryan's belongings had been found in the basement of Abbott's family home: her purse, her glasses, her schoolbooks, her student ID. The room fell silent. What else needed to be said? But few noticed something strange. None of the items bore Abbott's fingerprints. Not one. And stranger still, there was no blood, no hair, no physical trace of Stephanie ever being in that basement. The defense argued that the basement had no secure lock, that strangers could have accessed it over the years. Georgia Abbott, Burton's own mother, was the one who found the items, not the police. And if Burton had murdered Stephanie, why hide her things in the same house where his wife and child lived? Why not destroy the evidence? Too convenient. Or too naive to be staged. There were no witnesses placing Abbott near Stephanie. No one saw him with her. There was no proof he had ever traveled to Redwood City, over 180 miles away, the place where her body was discovered. No tire tracks. No timeline. No motive. Only the basement. Only the belongings. But to the jury, that was enough. To the public, it was more than enough. And as the prosecution played emotional footage of Stephanie's grieving family, the courtroom shifted. Rationality dimmed. Emotion took over. The jurors, perhaps, weren't seeking the truth anymore. They were seeking someone to blame. And Burton Abbott, young, silent, already stained in the public eye, fit the role too well. The verdict came fast: death by gas chamber. No hesitation. No mercy. At just 27 years old, Burton became one of California's youngest death row inmates at the time. But the story didn't end there. His lawyers filed appeal after appeal. The case reached the California Supreme Court. And outside the courtroom, whispers began. Was the evidence planted? Could someone have framed him? And if so, who would have had access to that basement, and a reason to destroy 2 lives in the process? Even Georgia Abbott, the woman who had uncovered the girl's belongings, began to question everything she thought she knew. But this wasn't the end. In fact, the final hours before Burton's execution would unravel everything. A desperate phone call. A request for delay. A faint hope flickering in the dark. Part 4, The Execution Hour, When Truth Arrived Too Late. March 15, 1957. A gray, suffocating morning. The kind of day that feels like death is already in the air. Inside the cold, concrete walls of San Quentin prison, Burton Abbott sat silently on a metal bed, hands lightly clasped, staring into the distance beyond the steel bars. No appeals left. No reporters asking questions. No crowds protesting. Just him, and the ticking of a silent death clock behind those gray walls. Burton had been woken early. The guards handed him his final outfit, a clean white uniform known grimly as the death suit. He ate a modest breakfast, scribbled his last words to his wife and son, and signed the final paperwork. But his eyes told a different story. They didn't look defeated. They looked like they were still holding something, a truth, a secret, that no one had ever truly listened to. His final whispered words to the guard beside him. "I didn't kill that girl. I swear." 10:30 a.m. Preparations for the execution began. In the gas chamber, a small, hexagonal, sterile room of steel and glass, technicians checked the valves and cyanide systems. The room felt more like a modern grave than a place of justice. No candles. No flowers. No tears. Only machinery, order, and death. 10:45 a.m. A sudden phone call broke the routine. It came from the governor of California, Goodwin Knight. The warden went still. The message was clear. The governor was reconsidering a possible stay of execution. Multiple last-minute pleas, from journalists, citizens, and even Abbott's attorney, had raised enough doubt. "There are things in this case," they said, "that still don't add up." The governor ordered. "Hold off. I need a few more minutes. The stay order is being typed now." The document was being drafted at lightning speed. The courier was already at the governor's office. Just a few more minutes. That's all they needed. A few more minutes. But at San Quentin, time had already run out. 11 a.m. sharp. Not a second late. Burton Abbott was led into the gas chamber. The steel doors sealed tight. He didn't resist. He didn't cry. He just turned his head to glance through the small glass window, and saw nothing. No family. No lawyer. No witnesses. No one to hear his last, trembling words. "I am innocent." 1 second. 2 seconds. The cyanide gas was released. The air grew thick with the stench of death. Burton leaned back, breathing in deeply, as if accepting something even more bitter than poison. "They're killing me, for something I didn't do." Then, just minutes after the execution began, a second phone call rang through from the governor's office. The secretary shouted through the line. "Stop. The stay order is ready." But it was too late. Burton Abbott was already dead. His body, now still and cold, lay motionless in the midst of toxic gas and silence. No one was punished for proceeding without delay. No investigations were launched. No public apology ever came. The moment passed like vapor. Like he never mattered. A life was taken. Just 3 minutes away from possible salvation. But death wasn't the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a much darker mystery. Because if Burton Abbott was truly innocent, then who really killed Stephanie Bryan? And why has the real killer never been found? Part 5, The Unanswered Questions, The Ghost of Stephanie Bryan. Burton Abbott was dead. The court had closed the case. But justice was still missing. Because when the gas chamber door shut tight, it didn't bury the doubts, it awakened them. They rose like ghosts, haunting the memories of anyone who had followed this trial. Questions that screamed in silence. Details that twisted reality. Truths that refused to stay hidden. Let's begin with the discovery. Stephanie Bryan's body was found near the Abbott family's cabin. That's true. But something felt wrong. First, would a man with no violent record, a stable home, and a wife and child, really be careless enough to keep a body near a property linked to him? Was he stupid? Or had someone wanted it to be found? Some accounts claimed the cabin wasn't solely used by the Abbott family. It had been accessed by neighbors and even family friends on occasion. Why wasn't that thoroughly investigated? Then, there's the damning evidence: Stephanie's belongings, her glasses, her wallet, her ID, all found in the Abbott home's basement. But again, it felt too perfect. Too clean. It was as if someone had carefully planted it there. And the strangest part? Burton himself alerted the police about a suspicious find in his basement. Would a murderer do that? Or was he genuinely shocked, perhaps even suspecting he was being framed? The trial itself? It was a circus of assumptions. No fingerprints. No eyewitnesses. No DNA. No murder weapon. Just fear, suspicion, and a desperate public wanting justice for a murdered girl. But here's the thing. Sometimes justice isn't about finding the truth. It's about finding someone to blame. Years after Burton's execution, chilling rumors began to surface. One man, who lived close to Stephanie's home, had a past, a criminal history involving minors, and he abruptly left town after the murder. He was never interviewed. Never interrogated. Why? Then came another lead, a drifter often seen lurking around the Berkeley school grounds. Odd behavior. Unexplained presence. Yet, once again, the police dismissed it. Too inconvenient. Too late. So the ultimate question remains. If Burton Abbott didn't kill Stephanie Bryan, who did? And how long have they lived, unpunished? This isn't just the story of a man executed in a steel chamber. It's the story of a murdered girl and a justice system that may have silenced the wrong man, while the real killer vanished into the shadows. What do you believe? Was Burton Abbott a cold-blooded murderer, or a victim of one of America's gravest miscarriages of justice? The day Burton Abbott was executed, the skies above San Quentin offered no mercy. The clouds were heavy, the sea wind sharp and cold, as if even nature itself held its breath, waiting not for justice, but for a truth long buried. Outside the prison gates, two crowds had gathered. One side chanted, "Justice for Stephanie," fueled by grief and rage, demanding vengeance for an innocent girl. The other stood in solemn silence, holding signs that read, "Stop the execution. Investigate again." In their eyes burned not anger, but fear. The fear that the wrong man was about to die. Reporters on the scene described a strange atmosphere. No one, not even those convinced of Burton's guilt, felt closure. Because when Abbott stepped into the gas chamber, he didn't scream. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. Instead, he looked through the glass, where his wife, his mother, and his lawyer were watching, with an expression that would haunt everyone who saw it. It wasn't the gaze of a killer. It was the gaze of a man who had been abandoned by the world. A man who knew he was about to die for something he did not do. His mother collapsed as the gas was released, not from the fumes, but from heartbreak. She had fought alongside her son to the very end. Letters to governors. Pleas to reporters. Appeals through the courts. And now, all of it vanished, smothered in a sterile cloud of poison. One of the prison guards later admitted in his memoir, "I've seen dozens of executions. But Burton's eyes, I still see them in my nightmares." Georgia, Burton's wife, never left the state. She never remarried. She gave only one public statement in the years after. "I didn't just lose my husband. I lost my faith in people." And what about Stephanie Bryan, the 14-year-old girl whose death sparked it all? We still don't truly know what happened to her. The full truth of that day, what happened on the path she took home from school, died with her. And perhaps, with Burton too. Because this wasn't just the death of one person. It was the erasure of two lives. One, stolen by a killer. The other, possibly stolen by the system. The Burton Abbott case is more than a courtroom tragedy. It is a mirror held up to the justice system, a mirror that shows how fear, pressure, and a thirst for closure can lead us to kill, without certainty. In this case, justice wasn't a scale. It was a blade. And when that blade fell, it didn't just cut down a man, it severed the public's trust in truth, in fairness, in mercy. And perhaps the most chilling truth of all is this. We may never know what really happened. There are no more suspects. No more witnesses. No more second chances. So what do you believe? Was Burton Abbott a cold-hearted murderer? Or was he an ordinary man, crushed beneath the weight of a justice system too eager to punish, too blind to see? We're not here to convince you of one truth, only to urge you to think again. Because if a man like Burton Abbott can be sentenced to die based on shaky evidence, then it can happen to anyone. Even you. If you've made it this far, thank you, truly, for giving your time, your attention, and your mind to this story. Your willingness to question, to feel, and to reflect means more than you know. Please consider subscribing, leaving a comment, and sharing this video. Because stories like this deserve to be remembered, not just for the horror, but for the warning they carry. We'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay curious, stay critical, and stay human.